There and welcome back. Today I will be talking a little bit about Ralph Ellison, and he is the author of the very important, very influential novel Invisible Man, which we are reading some very short excerpts from. What do we need to know about him? He was born in Oklahoma. He was raised in Oklahoma City. So he's coming from the Midwest, or what is called the Midwest. That's a title that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Just call it Mid. And in that way, he's representing a different kind of African American voice based on regionalism, although Invisible Man does take place on the East Coast. Now, there are other voices coming out of the Midwest, including Toni Morrison, I want to say, more than half a century later, who sets a lot of her narratives around Ohio. And Oklahoma City is still in the news, or I would say more accurately in the public imagination, because of the renewed interest in the Oklahoma City massacre that happened during, I believe it was the 1920s, where a very successful African American region of Oklahoma City was just basically destroyed by other people, including the KKK and other racist citizens of the area. If you've been watching the new Watchmen series that came out, I want to say about a year ago now, you're going to get part of that narrative. I think it comes out somewhere else too. Yeah, okay, that thought has left me. He also attended the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, and if the Tuskegee Institute is something that rings a bell for you, that's because this was the institution that Booker T. Washington helped to found. So we have that connection there as well. And he was a very independent writer, and he wanted to write fiction, but was not necessarily interested in becoming any kind of spokesperson to talk about race relations in the United States. And there's my phone going off in the background. We still have a landline for emergencies. Super annoying. I'm gonna try to keep going through this. So even though I think there was a lot of implicit or implied criticism of race relations in the United States in Invisible Man, he does not come out and say what is wrong and what needs to be fixed. And he certainly didn't talk about those kinds of concerns when he was being interviewed. So he kind of detached himself from that whole tradition of not only being a very socially conscious writer and being forthcoming and talking about the troubles with race relations in the US. And that created a lot of friction between him and other more established African American writers of the time, including those Harlem Renaissance writers. And it brings up some very interesting questions about the nature of art and literature and how it should relate to social concerns of the day. Coming up next, Invisible Man wins the National Book Award in 1945. But again, he received blowback within the African American literary community because it was not realistic, and because it did not come out and more explicitly discuss what the core terrible problems were with racism in the United States during that time. Now, interestingly, some critics have speculated that one of the reasons Invisible Man could win the National Book Award is because it was a fantastic, even surreal novel in some ways, and did not focus on race relations in a more concrete way, in a more realistic social protest milieu, like some of the other Harlem Renaissance writers would do in their works, but also outside of their works, in their activist lives. Now, speaking to that unrealistic or surrealistic or even dreamlike aspect of Invisible Man, it can remind readers of other modernist writers just a tad earlier than Ralph Ellison. If you think about Franz Kafka and The Trial, or probably something more better known would be The Hunger Artist and Metamorphosis. These narratives put in certain plot points and certain features that are clearly outside what we would see of reality. Um, and they're presented as almost matter-of-factly, like nobody's really wowing about them or saying, this is crazy, this shouldn't happen in our world. It's just happening. If you read Nikolai Gogol, you might see some of that too in some of his very famous short stories. He's Russian, such as The Overcoat and The Nose. So that dreamlike or nightmare-like quality to some of what Ellison writes in Invisible Man in some ways makes him closer to a European modernist than a Harlem Renaissance writer in terms of theme and narrative. So in some ways he's a very mixed bag, but it makes for some exciting stuff. I mean, we meet the speaker, the protagonist of Invisible Man, saying that he's invisible and talking about how he is not seen at all when people come up to him. And that leaves us with these dreamlike questions. Is he really being seen? Is he not? Am I supposed to take this literally? Is this just a large metaphor going on? It's hard to know. And then when he talks about stealing electricity from the monopolated electric company, notice that's a combination of the words incorporated and monopoly, which says something about the relationship between utilities and very powerful corporate powers in the United States. So there are all kinds of what you can read as embedded social and race relation critiques embedded in Invisible Man. But he's never going to explain them. He's never going to, in the novel or in an interview, come out and say, this is what I meant, this is what I think the problem is with society. Other points that you should be thinking about too is when we get out of the prologue and move towards the battle royale scene. This is such a dreamscape. It feels in some ways very real, but in some ways nightmarish and outside of the logic of our waking lives. So keep that in mind too, and think about, what kind of symbolism might be going on in those scenes. African Americans reaching for coins that are on an electrocuted rug. African Americans blindfolded and punching and beating each other in a ring while the rich white men of the city watch and cheer on. What's the symbolism there? The presence of a white woman completely naked with an American flag right above her groin that all the African American men are afraid to look at. What might be the symbolism there? There's a lot going on in this scene too. And on top of all of that, this is a place where the speaker is supposed to be giving a speech regarding the scholarship that he got. And to put this battle royale, this African American versus African American punching scene right next to this speech where he's bloodied and he's having trouble even getting the words out, says a lot implicitly. It suggests a lot about African American relations with the white hegemony, the white dominant power and social structure of its time. So keep that in mind. It's a very fascinating read, and I hope you like it a lot. I will also be posting a video to show Louis Armstrong's performance of Black and Blue, which is mentioned in the prologue, which is a fantastic song all about the relationship of Black America to white America. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you soon.